Good morning to you all. I wish you a warm welcome. As Chancellor of the University of Hull, I declare congregation open for the conferment of degrees and invite you all to be seated.
Jannie Weeks. Natasha Marie Wingham.
And now, delightful, it's my opportunity to add my congratulations to you all. It's an absolute delight being Chancellor of the University of Hull. The changes, the achievements, the investment, the Alain Medical Centre, the Middleton Hall, the student accommodation, the sports facilities, constant role of improvement and enhancement. But above all, my joy is to be able to be here for the degree-giving ceremonies. Now, I would so like to talk to all of you because you've all got a story to tell. You're all on your way from somewhere to somewhere. And you've had, for most of you, 3 years really consolidating your beliefs, your understandings, not just your skills and learning, but it's your judgment, your view of the world, the person you are, the person you're going to be. And how wonderful to be able to do that in such a multicultural environment. This university now has been going for 90 years. 170,000 people have been through our portals from 172 different countries, and that is just a wonderful experience. Of course, you've had all the joy of the City of Culture, which has been really magnificent. And Alan Johnson spoke so warmly and such a heartfelt way about it. Instead of people slightly sneering about Hull, they now speak with respect and excitement and a sort of sense of facing the future. And that is really tremendous. Now let me talk first of all to those of you who've studied law. And you're all going on really interesting journeys. Some of you are going to take forward your law in Nigeria, or in Malaysia, or in Leeds, or in Luton. Some going to bar schools, some going to be solicitors. One of you is going to work for an international organisation as a lawyer. How important is that? Someone going into journalism. How important is that in this era of fake news, false facts, and bombardment by Twitter and social media, which don't have to have any obligation to speak truthfully. Lies are just as acceptable as the truth. A very distressing development in a democracy. I particularly like the woman who's done a law degree because she wants to go in, she's in adoption work, and she wants to be a family lawyer. This was my background. I was chairman of a juvenile court, and the quality of lawyers advising young people and families often isn't as good as it should be. Very subtle, very complex. Now, the great thing about her, she was doing her degree while her 2 sons were doing their degrees at other universities. This is the joy of the world in which we now live. I mean, in 1920s, about less than a quarter of students were women. By now, over half of students are women. So this has been the year of celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage. And we've seen a transformation. When I went to the House of Commons, I was asked questions like, well, Mrs. Bottomley, if you want to vote one way and your husband wants you to vote another way, which way will you vote? Genuinely, I was asked this. And at that time, there were 22 women out of 600. Well, now, a third of MPs are women. I think Mrs. Thatcher was the 7th woman in the British Cabinet. I was the 9th woman in the British Cabinet. And now approaching 50 and a second female Prime Minister. And above all, we have a female Vice-Chancellor at our wonderful university. So this has been a generation of transformation for women, and wonderful that is. But back to the rule of law. There's a very famous judge, Lord Bingham, and he used to say, in a world divided by differences of nationality, race, religion, class, and wealth, the rule of law is one of the greatest unifying factors, perhaps the greatest, the nearest we all are likely to approach to a universal secular religion. So whatever way you use your law, this is really fundamental to the society in which we live and operate. And you know there are still swathes of the world where corruption is endemic, where falsehood, false arrest, and so on and so forth. There is no respect for the rule of law at all. So we should never take it for granted, and we should do all we can to extend and promote it internationally. And I then want to move on to politics. Well, we've had a wonderful example of a very distinguished politician, probably the best leader the Labour Party didn't have, and somebody who is always problem-solving, always pragmatic. A lot of people talk greatly about trade unions. I think trade unions are a really good training to become a Member of Parliament, because instead of being loners, which lots of MPs are today, they're on their tweets, on their social medias, but they live in a sort of vacuum of their own little world. If you've been in a trade union, you've been in an organisation, and you actually to change people, to take you with you, to negotiate, there always has to be compromise. And it's one of the reasons I think Alan Johnson was such a remarkable success in every single department he was in, building bridges, bringing people together, never being needlessly partisan. And those are the people that we so need to go into the political world. Now, there you are. You're a recruiting ground for politicians. You've had Lord Norton train you, supervise you, explain to you how the Houses of Parliament work, and you are an extraordinarily popular cohort at Westminster. So one of the reasons I first knew that Hull was the place to be was I had a series of interns from the University of Hull, and whatever I said to them, I couldn't persuade them to say anything other than Hull was a wonderful place. I mean, I used to sort of talk to them to try and trap them into saying anything negative about the university, but there was no way ever they were going to say anything other. But this is a respectful, a community of mutual trust, a university where you can be yourself. And there are lots of people in lots of settings where they can't be themselves. They can't really be true about their faith, their orientation, their religion, and so on and so forth. But this believes in all of you as citizens, as individuals. And those of you who rightly, coming across the stage, you look at the hall, you thank all these poor old parents and children and brothers and sisters who've had to put up with you when you've been perfectly impossible during these years of studying. I don't think you were always as mild, obedient, good and kind as you looked this morning. But those of you, the others of you, also looked, I'm so pleased, behind me, at the faculty, at the academic staff, because they're the people who've invested in you. And again, they don't leave you alone, they help you. The lectures are really interesting. They're available for you, and so many compliments. And the teaching is really, really important and really fundamental at the university. I sometimes think, because we're an old new university in a way, and we think 90 years is a long time, but we've still got the flexibility to adapt our courses, to be responsive to student needs, responsive to the world in which we live. So there are a huge number of people at Westminster, I'm sure you know, who went to the University of Hull. So Lord Perec from our politics department, alongside Lord Norton. Roy Hattersley was here, Frank Field, my first boss. I first worked for Frank Field. He paid me £12 a week, overpaid ever since then, he said, Virginia. I was researching into poverty. And I left the Labour Party. I left the Labour Party because at that time the unions were so dominated by the white man at work. They were anti-woman and anti-ethnic minority. Now, when I tell you that at the time of the appalling Grenfell Tower, the leader of the ambulance service, the police service, and the fire service in London were all female, were all women. It just shows you the generation change that we've seen. But my concern for the future is that somehow the political world is becoming fragmented. I think many of us thought we were going to be more international and more mutually respectful and believe in free trade, which is the way to prosperity. Here we are at the Humber, this wonderful port going out on the world. But suddenly people are turning in. They're suspicious of globalization. Protection and nationalism is coming back in. So we need you graduates going out arguing why we need to be internationally respectful, trustful, whether you look at the election of Trump, the vote about Brexit, some of the recent developments in France, in Turkey. These are really worrying change in the tide from the way life was developing a few years back. And as Edmund Burke said, all that's needed for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do nothing. So you have an obligation, I believe. You've been invested in by your families, by your academic staff. You have an obligation to go out and do what is right. I just want to finish by leaving you with a quote from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was a curious man. He founded, of course, the largest company by market cap in the world, of Apple. Quite extraordinary achievement. And what he said was, here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the one thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward, and while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius, because the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Think about it. Congratulations, good luck, and I declare congregation closed. And remembering our wonderful visit from Her Majesty the Queen last summer, when officially she'd retired from official duties and came to open our new medical centre and be involved in the City of Council, can I ask you all now to stand for the National Anthem?